Welcome. Today we tackle topics critical to our freedom, our health, and our environment. We'll consider drones, the pilotless airplanes. They are common in warfare, but do we want them hovering over our borders, our neighborhoods, our protest marches? Also today, one new environmental technology tells us when it's dangerous to flush, another when it's dangerous to breathe. We'll also talk seriously about the weather. Does a warm spring mean a scorching summer or something worse? We'll get to all this, but let's begin with some digital news. A few days ago, we learned that the Justice Department is prosecuting Apple Computer and some big publishers for allegedly colluding to keep the price of ebooks artificially high. Will this suit help us consumers with low-priced books to read on our iPads and Kindles, or will it cripple a publishing industry that just figured out how to make money in the digital age? Joining us via Skype from Portland, the founder of the International Center for Law and Economics, Geoffrey Manne. Hello from New York. Thank you very much for doing this, Mr. Manne.
Hi, Brian. Nice to talk with you. Thanks for having me.
So I think a lot of people have seen this in the news, but don't quite understand it yet. What did Apple and the publishers allegedly do?
Well, the allegation is that the publishers and Apple colluded or fixed prices in the ebook market by means of agreeing to a particular type of contract by which these books would be made available to Apple and then through Apple to users through the iBook store. The claim is that this violates Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which prohibits this kind of agreement among competitors. And the allegation would be, although it's not necessarily required that they say this in the complaint, but essentially the allegation is this will raise the price of ebooks to the detriment of consumers.
And is this already in effect? Are we paying X dollars per ebook now because the price has been allegedly fixed?
Oh, well, yeah, that's indeed the allegation. If you recall, about 2 years ago, I think it was, there was a big dust-up between Amazon and, in particular, Macmillan publishers, as Macmillan and other publishers tried to induce Amazon to move to this particular contractual model. Amazon tried to resist for a short period of time. Macmillan and I believe other publishers' books were unavailable on Amazon. And then as a means of resolving that, Amazon capitulated and agreed, rather than pricing ebooks as they previously had on their own terms, generally at $9.99 per ebook, they agreed that they would let the publishers set the price and that Amazon would pass on that price as determined by the publishers to consumers. And that's been in effect for, as I said, for about 2 years now, and that's the model under which Apple entered this market again about 2 years ago.
And a lot of the commentary that I read says it's really Amazon that is the 800-pound gorilla here that we should be much more worried about, either as readers or as writers, that they're the ones with the real potential for monopoly power and therefore to set price and even determine what kinds of books are available to the general public almost by itself. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure that I would say that anyone has any potential monopoly here. I think one of the first things to remember is that, at least in the current state of affairs, many more books are purchased in the traditional fashion, as these ones behind me were, and that those are still a competitive force on ebook pricing. And meanwhile, I think even in the absence of Apple in this market, you have to remember that any allegation that Amazon was somehow causing all kinds of problems had to confront the fact that Amazon was pricing books very cheaply, in fact, more cheaply than the publishers wanted them to, and more cheaply than they are sold generally sold through the iBook store, and that until this action, until the Amazon capitulated in this negotiation with the publishers, and then now following with the DOJ's antitrust suit, I have to say that prices were probably lower. Perhaps there was less variability in pricing, and that might be worth discussing. But certainly prices were potentially lower. The claim that Amazon was monopolizing here would have to be something like their aim was to build a massive market around their own platform around their own ebooks, and then at some point in the future, having solidified their dominance over this market, they would turn around and be able to raise these prices. If they never did that, if they continued to sell books at a very low price, if they continued to sell books at a very low price, whether they had a monopoly or not is hardly problematic. What matters is the effect on consumer welfare, and I don't think argue that consumers were hurt then.
Except that critics see Amazon as planning to try to put book publishers themselves out of business and publish by itself and vertically integrate, as they say on Wall Street, and kind of own the whole market and maybe not have the incentive to invest in real literature, real nonfiction. So that's the theory anyway.
Go
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that two things. One, it does seem that Amazon is interested in facilitating what we would say disintermediating the publishers here and facilitating authors' direct access to purchasers through Amazon's platform. Not sure how that hurts anyone except the publishers. I think that's a potential win-win for everyone else. Arguing that it's a problem that hurts the publishers is not unlike arguing that the invention of the car was really catastrophic for the buggy whip manufacturers. Probably true, but I'm not sure that's something we should really worry about. Meanwhile, my recollection is that Apple has since created a product that really facilitates the self-publication of books, and I'm not sure if the aim was to bring in Apple in order to prevent Amazon from facilitating direct publication. I'm not sure that was trading up from the point of view of the publishers.
By the way, in just a few seconds that we have left, Apple did basically the same thing with music, right? iTunes collaborated with the main record companies to set prices, 99 cents a track and all of that, but they didn't get sued for antitrust in the case of music. So what's the difference?
I'm not sure that there is a difference. I suppose one possible difference is that the DOJ or anyone else who might have looked at it simply didn't have the right kind of evidence to be able to bring a case. But the model of what has happened in the iTunes store for music and as well for apps is instructive because it is exactly like what Apple and the publishers have tried to implement here. There's no difference. The model is the same. The platform is essentially the same, and you're right. If one of them is problematic, it seems to me that probably all the others should be. Rather, the right way to phrase that is none of them is probably all that problematic, especially if that type of model, if that type of agreement was necessary in order to induce Apple to enter the market in the first place, which again is, from a broader perspective, is I think undeniably good for consumers.
All right, the new media battle over the old medium of books. Thank you very much. Up next, renowned science writer James Gleick. He weighs in on what should lie, in his opinion, at the root of the government's antitrust case: preserving the information marketplace.
I first started skating with my friend. He had an extra board, and then he just gave it to me, and I've been skating ever since. Well, when I don't land a trick and I have my mind set on something, and I'm not getting what I want, I just keep going for it until I get it right. My mom, she didn't go to college, so she wants me to experience that whole thing, and so I could end up getting like a good job. I think to get into college, I'll have to be determined, just like when I want to get a new trick, and skating's helped me realize I've got what it takes.
In the words of our next guest, whenever information becomes cheap, attention becomes expensive. Science writer and Authors Guild spokesperson James Gleick has popularized groundbreaking concepts like chaos theory and chronicled the lives of important scientists. His recent book, The Information, A History, A Theory, A Flood, is a sweeping history of how information and communication have brought us to the point where we are all now awash in bits and bytes. James Gleick, an honor. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
First, on the conversation we were just hearing, I don't know if you could hear the end of it, but this lawsuit against Apple and this question of which model is more threatening to readers of books, what Amazon is trying to do or what Apple is trying to do. Do you have an opinion on all of that?
I do. Well, I have a very strong opinion. I think I'm baffled by what the Justice Department is doing here. I think they've lost their minds. I think they're making a terrible mistake. The whole thing is misguided.
Because?
Because there is no price fixing in the book business. They're trying to solve a non-existent problem. Every book is priced individually. My book, which is sitting at your right here, costs $15 or something like that. It is competing with, all right.
For those who haven't seen it.
It's competing with hundreds of thousands of other books. The publisher is setting the price, but it's setting the price to sell. I mean, it's not. The publisher does not have any monopoly on any one book or even on its entire list of books.
But allegedly, if I understand the federal government suit correctly, Apple is colluding with all 5 of the biggest publishers to set the same prices for their competing products, which makes them no longer competing, allegedly.
No, that's not exactly what happened. What happened is this. Before Apple got into the business, the publishers were selling ebooks almost entirely through Amazon. Amazon had 90% of the ebook market. And Amazon's deal with the publishers was based on the old-fashioned model of selling books by wholesale. In the old-fashioned model, a bookstore would buy 20 books from a publisher at a wholesale price. They'd get it marked down 45 or 50%, and the books would get on a truck, and gasoline would be expended, and the books would arrive, and the bookstore would own the physical books.
And if they didn't sell them, they took a loss.
They took a loss, or they could maybe send them back to the publisher and get a refund, but not always. And then the bookstore could essentially set their own price, which was usually, in the old days, the retail price or a little bit less. With Amazon, because of its volume, and in particular because of its captive audience, its large control of the ebook market, was able to manipulate prices much more quickly. And in some cases, for popular books, it was setting prices very low. It was selling books at a loss for $9.99, the price that the Justice Department is now making famous because they're outraged that the publishers didn't like it. If you think about it, for any given book, it's great for the publisher if the publisher is selling it to Amazon for $12 a copy, and Amazon is discounting it to the Amazon has to pay the publisher $12, even if the list price is $24, let's say, and then Amazon goes ahead and sells it for $9.99, taking a loss. The publisher is still getting its money. They should be happy. The reason they weren't happy was that Amazon was selling these books at a loss for a reason. They were trying to establish dominance for their Kindle platform, which, as I say, was up to 90% of the ebook market. When Apple entered the picture, it enabled the publishers to choose a different model, where instead of allowing Amazon to set the price artificially low, the publisher could set the price and Amazon would get a percentage, or Apple would get a percentage. So the price for every book is set by the publisher, and Apple or Amazon is taking a cut, 30%. If you think about it, in my view, that's very fair. It's called the agency model because the seller is acting like an agent. It's providing a service, which is it's advertising the book and it's doing the transaction. It's handling the electronic money.
So are you more afraid of Amazon becoming dominant because they could then, as I was stating before, in theory, put publishers out of business, and they would control what gets published, and they may not have the commitment to intellectual content and artistic content that the current publishers do?
I'm not especially worried about Amazon putting the publishers out of business because I'm not a publisher. I don't know that that's their goal, but I do think that Amazon wants to dominate the ebook market, and I don't think that's good for anybody. I think ebooks should be sold for every platform, not just for a particular device, the Kindle, but for any device. And if you buy an ebook as a consumer, you shouldn't just have to read it on one device. You should be able to transfer it from one device to another. That's my view. Also, if there is only one dominant seller of ebooks, that's not good for anybody. That's the monopoly that the Justice Department should be worrying about. It seems to me that they're going after an appearance of collusion, and inadvertently they're going to be enabling a more dangerous monopoly.
Who speaks for the authors in court? You're speaking here in the court of public opinion, representing the Authors Guild. It seems like that's a battle between these media giants, Apple and Amazon, and the largest book publishers in the country. Who speaks for the writers?
Well, again, the authors are in a way innocent bystanders here. I mean, there are some authors who would be very happy to dispense with publishers and just be self-published or be published by Amazon. There are as many different models for publishing now as there are different authors, and that's completely fine. I'm not trying to say that the traditional publishing model is the only valid one, but I do think that it's important for authors that there be a viable bookstore world. Independent bookstores, brick and mortar bookstores have an important role to play too. You know, they're going out of business left and right. Speaking as an author, I want to see those bookstores stay in business. I think the existence of those bookstores is good for me. I want people to be able to walk into their neighborhood bookstore, talk to a bookseller who's actually read the books and is arranging his or her shelves with some intelligence and some taste. I think that's good for everybody. That's the kind of ecosystem that I think benefits authors and readers.
Do you think it's not just important for authors, but that it's important for, let's say, information, for intellectual content, artistic content, for meaning in our society?
Well, we're living in a tumultuous time where information is concerned. I think part of what we're seeing in this Justice Department case is a collision between old forms of information and new forms of information. I mean, on the one hand, the book is an ancient information technology, and our relationship to our books as readers it used to be very solitary. You would take the book, you owned it, you would go off into the woods, you flip it open, read through the pages. It was just you and the book.
Now you like it on Facebook, you comment below the last chapter, et cetera, et cetera.
We're in a very interconnected world where what we do is part of what everybody else is doing. We're part of a big community. And if we're reading ebooks, depending on what platform we're using, the people who sold us the ebook may be keeping track of what we're reading. Amazon knows not only which ebooks I've bought, but what page I'm on when I'm reading the ebook.
In your new book, you cite Marshall McLuhan from 1962 on living simultaneously in two contrasting forms of experience and society. What were the two at that time? And I think you were just drawing a parallel to that for today.
Marshall McLuhan was writing about new media on the cusp of the electronic revolution. For him, the new medium that was so exciting was television. And it wasn't just television, it was an old, grainy, black and white television, right?
50 years ago this year, 1962.
That's right. And so he didn't even dream of the internet, and yet in a way he was prescient. And he could foresee a lot of what we're living through now, which is, as he said, contrasting forms of experience. We are influenced not just by the content of our sources of information, not just by what the books say or by what the TV and radio programs say, but by the medium itself. It makes a difference to us whether we're getting the information from the printed page or from the airwaves.
We're already over time, but do you think that this has implications for news, for literature, even for our concept of meaning?
for all of the institutions that provide information to us as citizens of the information society, we're in a time of great tumult, and some of it is economic tumult. The old institutions, book publishers, print newspapers, brick and mortar bookstores are struggling for air, and new electronic disseminators of information are filling their shoes. And there's some good in that, but there's some dangers too.
James Gleick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Coming up next, empowering New Yorkers to monitor our own air and water quality.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at energysavers.gov.
When you earn your GED diploma, the barriers in your life fall. Earn your GED diploma and begin your brighter future.
The quality of New York City's air and water is vital to our health and well-being, of course, but it's hard to monitor it accurately. Now, technology is changing that. 2 local projects may soon make it possible for you to know how clean the air you are breathing is and to help keep the waters of NYC as pristine as possible. With me now are 2 of the people behind those projects, Joe Saavedra of Air Quality Egg and Leif Percifeild of Don't Flush Me. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Show us, tell us, what is the Air Quality Egg?
So the Air Quality Egg is a community-led distributed air quality sensor network. It's a project where we're really putting air quality sensing in the hands of citizens in a way that really hasn't been done before. This is a prototype of a sensor box. So the egg itself is a system that contains actually multiple pieces. And one piece would be a sensor unit that would sit outside of your home or maybe outside of your office and be measuring air quality in a persistent way, pushing data then to the internet. The egg itself, I don't have a prototype of here right now, but would sit maybe on your desk. That would be actually the gateway to the internet. It has an Ethernet connection and also can display data through colored light and also has actually a method for you inputting some data yourself.
And what is it measuring?
So we are, the project right now will have carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, temperature and humidity sensors on board, and we're working on a host of add-on sensors measuring things like ozone, blanking out right now.
Well, some of the common
yeah.
pollutants in the city.
A lot of different air quality.
And it's a desktop unit for your home or office?
So the egg itself, right, is an interface that might sit on your desk in your home.
Would it vary that much in our homes from day to day?
Well, the sensors would be outside, right? The sensors are meant to measure outdoor air quality. But however, indoor air quality is something that we're talking about making specifically units for measuring things like VOCs that are more volatile organic compounds, which are more prevalent in the home and also potentially more dangerous.
And you would upload via the unit to the web for what purpose? You want to know for yourself. What are you uploading to?
Right, so we're uploading to a database. One of the big collaborators on this project is a company called Patchbay. They're an internet data broker. We're pushing data to a database there with a very well-built API that lets users pull and push data from there. And so once the data is sent up there, it's in the cloud, right? All of it's historically cataloged, and you can pull it down from a number of different devices, cell phones.
So you're crowdsourcing air quality all over the city.
Absolutely.
Because individuals will have these eggs and upload these data points, and people will know somebody's home in Flushing and somebody's home in Bensonhurst, and et cetera, at any given moment.
Absolutely.
Speaking of flushing, tell us about Don't Flush Me.
So this is a project really to alert and enable New Yorkers to know the status of the New York City sewer system. There are times during heavy rains when the sewer system becomes overloaded. It can't carry the capacity of sewage and rainwater, and the excess is discharged into New York waterways. And so this is a project, and this is a prototype sensor for that, to understand when this happens, how often it happens, and to give people an opportunity to do something about it. This is sort of a beginning of what I like to call the participatory city, in that we get to make the city every day we use it.
In other words, there are some times when we flush our toilet and it's possible that it's going to go into the Hudson River.
Exactly.
And there are other times not.
Exactly. The New York City sewer system on a normal day is a fantastically engineered and designed and maintained system. But the sheer volume of water we're talking about here just makes it impossible to carry it all in these pipes. And
when
so,
it's raining a lot and there are
exactly,
overflows.
Exactly. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something like 1/10 of an inch of rain can produce enough rainwater to overload the system.
It's not a lot of rain.
Not a lot of rain, but it doesn't happen that often.
So hold that up. Show us more technologically what we're looking at.
So this is a prototype sensor that was actually rescued from the Gowanus. It succumbed to a high tide, and so was flooded out, and the electronics stopped working. But it's basically just a little solar-powered sensor that has a couple probes that connect to it that measure the temperature of the water and measure the quality of the water. And so that allows us to infer when there is a sewer overflow, because the receiving water bodies, the Hudson River, the Gowanus Canal, Newtown Creek, are all going to be a lot colder than any of the rainwater and combined sewer that comes out of the sewer pipes tend to be warmer. And they also carry a lot more pollutants. And so I use another probe that measures the dissolved solids in the water, and that will tell us when a sewer overflow has happened as well.
So you'd have to be a pretty environmentally committed individual to keep this in your home, to voluntarily not flush your toilet on certain days or at certain times so that you don't flood sewage into the waterways that are not near your home.
That's sort of the idea, and that's a problem that I've been dealing with. And one of the ways that I've dealt with that is I've got this little device here. This is an internet-connected light bulb. And so this is something that you would screw into the light fixture in your bathroom. And what this is going to do is it's going to display information about the sewer system. So the number one source of water use in the house is the toilet. But very close behind that are things like showers and laundry and dishes. So the idea is that if something is persistent in your house showing you the nature of the city sewer, so green light or white light, just normal light, you don't even know it's there, means that everything's copacetic. And then when it changes to red or it changes flashing, you know something's up. And so that's the time that you're going to say, hey, maybe I'm not going to do 5 loads of laundry today. Maybe I'm not going to take a 45-minute shower. These are the times when people can just make that kind of pointed conservation.
So you'd almost need the city to get behind this and say, okay, from now on, this is going to go in every dwelling that gets constructed or even retrofit. Because otherwise it's not going to make that much of a difference, is it?
For the devices, you definitely need some commitment. You definitely need people to buy into that. There are a lot of ways, and things I'm working on too are as simple as SMS text message alerts. So I think some astronomical number of New Yorkers have a cell phone, 90% or something really high. And it's something as simple as just a text message alert saying, in your neighborhood now, you registered for the Bronx or Brooklyn, your neighborhood now is experiencing a sewer overflow. Now we recommend that you save water in your neighborhood.
You guys are here with a air quality sensor and a water quality sensor. These boxes actually look quite similar. They're about the same size. They're little plastic boxes with clear tops. You have an egg, you have a light bulb. Did you work this up together?
So we both graduated from Parsons School for Design, the MFA Design and Technology program there. And I think what kind of you're getting at is the DIY aesthetic that both of these are using. You know, we're using weatherproof boxes. And I think what's happened is in the last few years that this kind of technology has become more accessible, more inexpensive, to the point where people are empowered to actually build these kinds of devices and learn more about their world in ways that before were not possible.
And I gather you've had some success crowdsourcing your funding as well through Kickstarter.
That's right, yep. So the air quality egg is currently on Kickstarter. I think we've got about 9 days left in our campaign. It's gone very well. We're almost, I think, $70,000 right now. And I think it's a great way to, you know, the project really is about a community, and Kickstarter as well is about building communities and having people with similar interests come together. And I think it's a really great place for us to be finding funding.
And funding for yours?
Yeah, so just recently I completed a campaign on a similar crowdsourced funding site. It's a local group. It's called IOBI, In Our Backyard, in response to the NIMBY, Not in My Backyard. And the idea behind this is it's in local environmental projects that target sort of your neighborhood. And so I put Don't Flush Me on there, and I received $3,000 in funding for the first round of prototype sensors. And that money is going to go to develop about 10 of these boxes and place them throughout the city as a start to this network.
IOBI, In Our Backyard.
In Our Backyard.
If we all were responsible to have wastewater treatment plants and bus depots and power plants and everything else in our backyard, we might as a society make make collective environmental decisions more soundly.
Exactly. That's the idea, is to encourage people to understand what's going on in their backyard and encourage positive things, positive changes, things that you would want in your backyard. You would want to know if there is sewage in your backyard. You would want to encourage farming in your neighborhood to encourage local organic foods.
Did you say MFA in technology?
MFA in Design and Technology. Yes.
Design and technology. Is it art or is it science?
I think it's both.
It definitely is both. I think without the creativity there, innovation really gets lost, right? And you know, with technology, you need that creativity to really push new ideas forward.
Same question.
Yeah, it's enabled us to make things with our ideas. So not only can we conceptualize kind of pie in the sky things about measuring the sewer system and creating information, you know, and disseminating information out there, which is an age-old problem, but then we can create technology that actually does this. You know, you can plug this into any light fixture now, or even plug it into the wall and use it. So I think without that creative push, and then again without the technology to back it up, a lot of these projects wouldn't get off the ground.
It's connected, it's personal, it may be the future of determining air and water quality. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
After the break, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's a drone coming to the airspace near you.
When you smoke around kids, you expose them to thousands of chemicals that are eating them alive. Cigarette smoke contains poisons like cyanide and carbon monoxide that trigger severe health problems, like painful ear infections, crippling asthma, and deadly pneumonia. Cigarette smoke is linked to low birth weight and doubles the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. Cigarettes are eating you and your kids alive. Quit smoking today. For help, call 311.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles.
Everybody bring it in.
I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out.
How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork?
I help keep kids in school.
Good.
And that's the name of the game.
My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Americans are familiar with drones from seeing them in the news, those unmanned aerial vehicles. From their use in Afghanistan, we know them, and in Pakistan to target the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But a new aviation bill means that drones will soon be coming to a slice of American airspace near you. The list of what drones could do here at home is long. Policing, border security, even journalism, just for starters. But a vehicle that can hover a couple of 100 feet in the air, monitoring everything it sees, sets off alarm bells for those concerned with privacy and civil liberties. Here to take a look at that aspect of the arrival of domestic drones are Catherine Crump, a staff attorney with the ACLU, and Harley Geiger from the Center for Democracy and Technolog, with us via Skype from Washington. Hello to both of you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Harley, you first. Tell us what this bill is from February.
So this is the FAA Modernization and Reform Act of 2012 and has been signed into law. And the law requires the FAA to issue a series of rules that will integrate drones into the U.S. national airspace system. The law requires full integration of drones of all sizes and types into the airspace of the United States by 2015. The first rules will be for law enforcement drones, and the FAA is expected to issue those rules in less than 1 month.
What does a drone look like? If this is going to be hovering above us, is this going to be like the Goodyear blimp over Yankee Stadium, or what?
Drones vary tremendously in what they look like. They can be as tiny as hummingbirds. They can potentially hover right by people's windows and take a look inside, or they can be enormous. For instance, the drones that are commonly used in Afghanistan or in Yemen are like large airplanes. So they can be incredibly diverse. The ones that law enforcement agents in the U.S. are most interested in are the smaller drones, which they could potentially use in domestic law enforcement operations.
So why are we concerned about this? Why not the more subtle and effective a law enforcement tool, the safer we are? Harley?
Well, we're concerned about drones because they offer a type of pervasive and constant monitoring that we really have not seen before. And in fact, they are really quite subtle depending on the model. They're very powerful surveillance tools. They can be equipped with sophisticated cameras, facial recognition, open Wi-Fi sniffers, and more. They can track individuals over a very wide area for a long period of time, and there's virtually no way to avoid them once you are out of doors. And unfortunately, the law offers individuals almost no protection from the use of drones to spy on you while you're outdoors, regardless of whether the drone is owned by a private citizen or a law enforcement agency. So you could be on YouTube the moment that you step out of your house. And lastly, drones, they can be weaponized, of course, and some drone models are capable of carrying weapons, such as beanbag guns or tasers, and domestic law enforcement here in the United States has repeatedly expressed interest in equipping drones with weapons to use on Americans.
So, Catherine, what are the ACLU's main concerns with respect to possible abuses?
I think we agree with everything that Harley just highlighted. The primary concern is that Americans will be subject to pervasive generalized surveillance when they leave their homes. Innocent Americans should be able to go outside without fearing that they're going to be monitored if they're simply on their way to work or going about their business. And I think that's the primary fear about the use of drones. I just want to clarify that the ACLU is not entirely opposed to the use of drones domestically. They're perfectly appropriate uses for them, but we're concerned that they don't overly erode the privacy of Americans and that they're only used in limited ways.
So what would you be advocating for? Things like court orders before a drone could be used to snoop on people, just as they need to get wiretap court orders now, for example?
I think that's a good example. I don't think drones in general should be used unless law enforcement agents have a reasonable belief that using a drone will turn up evidence of wrongdoing. I don't think they should be used, for example, to investigate into people's homes or other private protected spaces without a warrant. I think that there are meaningful safeguards that can be put in place to make sure that law enforcement can take advantage of this potentially useful tool without eroding Americans' privacy.
And Harley, none of these particular safeguards for these particular scenarios were put into place in the law that the president signed?
That's right. The law that the president signed actually says absolutely nothing about privacy or civil liberties. It says absolutely nothing about it. And in fact, Congress did not hold a hearing or ask for a report on privacy. And this is from a Congress that says that it cares about privacy, at least in the online sense. I should also say that CDT has a detailed legislative proposal at www.cdt.org. And I'll give you some of the highlights. We think that law enforcement should be prohibited from weaponizing drones, and also that law enforcement should be required to obtain a warrant in order to use drones for extended surveillance of a particular target. And law enforcement should apply to an independent official for authority to use drones for generalized surveillance, and that authority should expire after 30 days.
And who would grant that authority?
So if drone license holders fail to abide by the law, then the Department of Transportation should revoke their licenses and ground their drones.
Catherine, might drone manufacturers themselves voluntarily put such limitations into place because they don't want to get sued?
You know, that's an open question. Right now, drones are largely not being flown in the United States, and drone manufacturers are eager to change that and are somewhat concerned that these serious privacy issues will hamper widespread deployment. So I think this is a moment where we have a real opportunity to try to negotiate a solution so that drones can be adopted in ways that don't violate people's privacy. But of course, there's some real tensions between what the industry would want and what's in its financial interest and what civil libertarians are concerned about. So I think this is a debate we're all going to have to be watching over the next few years.
And do you see these in the hands of individuals or just law enforcement? If you're talking about drones as small as hummingbirds, are we going to see, to take a case that's in the news right now, the George Zimmerman neighborhood watch drone keeping an eye on somewhere, you know, equipped with tasers under the stand your ground law? Yeah, it's an absurd example perhaps, but something like that?
We will absolutely see drones being used by private individuals. And in fact, some private individuals are already using drones. Hobbyists use them. For $300, you can go on the internet and buy one of these things equipped with a camera. And there's actually, I think, in some ways, real potential benefits for the use of drones by private individuals. News organizations are very interested in their capacity to turn up evidence of wrongdoing. They can be used to monitor the police. The Occupy Wall Street movement, one individual named Tim Pool created something called the Occupcopter, which can, in his view, the best weapon the protesters have, I shouldn't say weapon, but the best tool the protesters have to protect against police abuses is to document what goes on the ground themselves. And so I think what makes this drone issue so fascinating but also difficult is the free speech ramifications that are in play at the same time as there's real privacy concerns.
Harley, we're already under surveillance everywhere. There's closed circuit cameras watching us from all kinds of angles and all kinds of directions, certainly here in New York City, whether people realize they're being watched or not. So does this really add anything that new?
So first of all, the fact that we already have CCTV is not a compelling reason to add another layer of surveillance via drones. But it does add things that are new. So first of all, most private individuals cannot afford their own CCTV network. But as Catherine said, you can go onto Amazon and purchase a drone right now for $300. It comes with a camera and it is Wi-Fi enabled. When you walk out of range of CCTV, it does not typically follow you. CCTV doesn't peer over your fence into your backyard, but drones can. They can, as I said, monitor individuals in a wide area continuously, and that's not something that we have seen with CCTV. It'll be more like CCTV on steroids, and it'll be put in the hands of not just law enforcement, but also commercial entities and private individuals.
What was this Wi-Fi capacity you were talking about?
I mentioned that the drone that you can purchase for $300 on Amazon comes Wi-Fi enabled. So you could potentially stream the video footage that you obtain via the drone, which is freely purchasable for a very cheap price.
And I guess the drone could then search for non-blocked Wi-Fi connections and look at the computers of people attached to it.
I see. Yes, that's right. You can easily, and in fact, it's already been done, outfit a drone with a Wi-Fi sniffer so that it can detect open Wi-Fi networks, as well as numerous other types of equipment, such as facial recognition or license plate recognition, and it'll be able to track individuals or their property outside of the range of normal CCTV.
So, Catherine, what's the timeline here? If this bill passed Congress now, just signed in February by President Obama, is it because they're enabling something that is expected on the actual marketplace? I know you've said to some degree this is already here, but what's the projected timeline for increased use?
The bill that was passed by Congress aims to incorporate drones into the national airspace by 2015. There are a bunch of intermediate deadlines, but that's the ultimate goal. And drones are already being used by local law enforcement agencies. But I think there's been increased pressure because thanks to the wars overseas, there's been a real market for the use of drones. The wars are winding down, and I think companies are looking for new markets. And given the intense interest of law enforcement agencies, they see a real opportunity to sell their products in the United States. So I think Americans need to know drones are no longer just about Afghanistan and Yemen. They're also about Colorado and Oklahoma and a town near you.
Well, thank you very much. Get ready for Drone Universe here in the United States. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, does this hot spring mean a sweltering summer or something worse?
I look up to a lot of the older heads, you know, the innovators, the heads of the art movements of the past. They kept it really edgy, and like a lot of the Latin American muralists and Latin American artists, and their styles were very unique and new to their time. You know, somewhat controversial, but that's who I look up to mainly. Personally, I'm very excited about going to college. It's something new and it's something different than what I'm used to. I'm definitely going to be a little out of my element, but that's what makes it so exciting, is that, you know, it's something fresh. Well, there's so many opportunities that I think I could miss out on if I didn't go, you know? Getting into college takes planning and vision. You know, it's just like when I take a brick wall and turn it into a canvas for my art. Paintings help me realize that I've got what it takes.
Do your part. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank today.
On Monday, it was pushing 90 degrees here in New York City, and it's only mid-April. And March was the hottest on record. Makes you wonder what July will be like. We have other more disturbing questions, like those 100 tornadoes in the Plains states last weekend. Is that the new normal? And is New York in for a steady diet of intense weather? For some answers, we have asked Andrew Freedman to join us. He is senior science writer for Climate Central, which does research and advocacy on climate change. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So Monday, April 16th, 85-ish. Does it mean we're in for a sweltering summer?
Strangely, no. It doesn't mean we're not in for a sweltering summer, but at Climate Central, we looked at the top 10 warmest winters and into the spring and tried to figure out, is that correlated with really warm, sweltering summers? Because you might think that, you know, it was in the upper 80s in March. What would that translate to in July? But we found that there wasn't really a correlation, that most of the warm winters were followed by relatively normal summers. So it's kind of, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. In general, though, we are headed towards much warmer summers as the decades go by and in the coming years.
There's a nice video on your website about the relationship between weather and climate and how to spot a trend on a graph. Let's check this out. Describe what we're seeing here.
Well, here you're seeing global surface temperature departures from average, and you're watching as the years tick by. You'll see a dramatic increase in the warm colors, in the reds and oranges, as you get into the 1990s all the way up to more recently. And it's striking how much more of the warming is also in the far northern regions and the poles especially.
Why would that be?
It's just the way the climate system is sort of set up in terms of maximizing the heat transport up in the Arctic, and it's kind of feedback loops. So if you have the sea ice, normally it's there, it's white, it reflects the incoming sun. When you melt it, you replace it with darker ocean water, which is like taking sunlight and shining it on asphalt, which makes it warm up much more. So then you have more warm water, more warm air, more melting ice, and it just keeps going.
And yet, am I correct to understand that your position is that we shouldn't rely on our experience of unusually hot weather to convince people that global warming is real and needs to be addressed?
Well, I think that, my personal standpoint is that journalists like myself have a responsibility to cover what the science says. And the scientists are really gearing up to try to figure out the relationship between extreme events and climate change. And we know enough already about how climate change is influencing the weather to be quite concerned. It's just when you get to certain types of weather events, so if you're talking about tornadoes versus hurricanes, each one kind of has to be dealt with separately. But we know that we're loading the dice in favor of more extreme events. And we know that, the deck is stacked against us more and more as we go into the future.
So let's look at another interesting video from your website on the progression of, the difference between weather and climate. This one's going to get to that. Let's see.
A common mistake when interpreting statistics is to look at them from too short a distance. This can make everything unclear and confusing. So forget the details and take a step back. You're looking at a dog when you should be concentrating on the owner. As you can see, the dog is all over the place, leaping and bouncing, sometimes upwards, sometimes downwards. But where do you think it'll be in 10 seconds' time? Around here, right? But at this moment, the dog is on its way downwards. So why do you think it'll find itself up there? It's because you've noticed the owner. The owner is the trend, and it's he who determines where they both will be in a while, as a bit longer than a couple of dog bounds. He could change direction. There's a lot we don't know about this guy, but everything we do know indicates he's heading in that direction. The owner is the long-term trend. The dog is the variation around this trend. Or, the owner is the climate, the dog is the weather.
So that's why not to be too concerned with individually hot days, cold days, big storms, in terms of what they actually signal for the longer term.
It depends exactly what you're talking about. Again, one hot day in early April is not necessarily something to freak out about. A hot March, like we had this March, with 15,000 records set, 15,000 warm records versus a couple hundred cold records in the U.S. A winter that didn't really exist for much of the much of the U.S. and Canada especially. These are all signs, but it's funny because that video kind of shows you what everybody's been fighting about in the climate change debate.
The dog.
The dog. Everybody's been fighting about the dog, and the scientists have been pointing to the line. And I cover and specialize in both, and I'm really interested in how extreme events are changing. And what you're seeing is the scientists are more and more tying those individual movements of the dog to these individual extremes to climate change in an interesting way. So you can say that climate makes certain events more likely to happen.
So we had a winterless winter in New York. They just had 100 tornadoes in a weekend in the Midwest. I heard a report from Anchorage, Alaska last week that said they just concluded their snowiest winter ever. Do you even tie that to global warming?
Well, it's hard to tie that. It's hard to tie both of those things or either of those things to climate change because the way that tornadoes are changing is not exactly clear. We know that we've put more water vapor in the air, so you have more fuel for thunderstorms. But tornadoes are very tricky. We don't even understand exactly what causes them. So scientists are modeling this and modeling how it's going to change due to global warming. And it's a mistake to assume that they won't change because of global warming, because we're changing the background conditions in which they occur. It's just the exact trends are a little unclear. Precipitation extremes are increasing, so that's consistent with both heavy snowfalls and heavy rainstorms. But was Anchorage, Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska was much more the victim of a persistent storm track in the Gulf of Alaska that created some awesome pictures of snow, and I was very jealous, but it wasn't, climate
I was speaking earlier today to a global warming skeptic who said, well, global warming may or may not be real, but if it is real, it's probably a good thing for humanity as a whole, because more moisture, as you say, warmer temperatures, that means more friendly condition for crops to grow all over the world. It'll be easier to feed the world.
That's an argument that's been used for decades, but it has really no scientific basis. All of the studies that have been done on crops, for example, show net reduction in agricultural output. You know, the U.S. bread basket of the Midwest may go up into Canada more, so that's good for Canada, not necessarily good for Midwestern farmers. Countries with burgeoning populations and more extreme weather events because of climate change and sea level rise are going to have a lot more problems. The costs drastically outweigh any benefits. There's like interesting geopolitical benefits of which countries might do better under climate change, and that's pretty much Russia and Canada. But in terms of will humanity benefit from this, absolutely not. And we're already seeing that we're not.
And in our last minute, what do you project for New York based on the science?
Based on the science, I think that, you know, one summer to the next is a little bit, you know, hard. You're paying attention to the dog. But in terms of the trend line, we're looking at much greater impacts from extreme weather in the next several years, in the next couple of decades. As sea level rises, you're not going to see like this gradual increase and suddenly Staten Island is gone. You're going to see suddenly the storms that used to cause coastal flooding every 100 years seem to come every 50 years because the sea level is higher and you end up with more, it's easier to flood. So city officials are very concerned about maintaining the infrastructure and designing things. Building up levees around LaGuardia Airport, for example, is one thing that's been talked about, securing the subway system. So it's a huge challenge for New York. But New York, among global cities, is pretty much at the forefront of fighting this. That's not to say they're doing everything or doing everything right or have the resources, but they are at least going in the right direction.
All right, we are not doomed, but the future is coming based on what we've done in the past, and we have to be ready for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week's show. We roll out a new episode Wednesday nights at 7:30, or see us anytime at CUNY.tv. Next week, will spring bring the return of Occupy Wall Street? And check out my daily radio show, weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC. Tomorrow morning, Gridlock Sam Schwartz proposes bicycle and pedestrian bridges to Manhattan. That's on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC. Talk to you then.